Welcome to Medicine with the Metals. Today we have a really special guest. We have David Wade Pope. He is the founder of BGD Ministries. And I'm going to have Dave go ahead and introduce himself. Over the last few weeks, me and Dave have really become really close, and we've really talked about a lot of really cool things in this space. And we're going to talk a little bit about what he's doing and explore a little further. But we're going to let him go ahead and introduce himself first. So
Yeah, friends call me Wade. You want to look me up on LinkedIn? It's David Wade Pope. You can even look me up on Facebook, but it's Wade Pope on Facebook. A lot of the stories there. A little bit about myself. I'll try to make this kind of wrap it up. I was diagnosed with a mental health disorder at a young age, at the age of 11, and seemed to manage it pretty well. Once I became about 17 years old, went on, had a great military career. About 4.5 years spent military. Got out. After college, my career took off. So basically, managed everything very well for about 20 years with the depression and everything. Mine was also coupled with alcoholism, extreme alcoholism. And so finally, there came a point to where I broke. I completely broke. So I had succeeded far beyond my imagination in life, yet I was completely miserable, and I'd reached that bottom that people talk about. And I literally, and this is getting deep real fast, but I literally experienced in 2014 what I believe to be an alcoholic psychosis. I experienced what an existence would feel like without a God. So a godless existence, meaning nothing. And I experienced it for about a fraction of a second, because I can tell you, if it would have been any longer than that, there's no way I could have possibly have tolerated it. There's no way I could have done. So basically that had just a marked impression on me, obviously. I went on to kind of finish myself off and tried AA for about 7 years, and didn't do the steps, but I went in and I would do the first couple steps. I'd get scared, like most people do around step 4. And because you have to face what's really bothering you, what the real issues are. And I would go back out and I would drink again. Couple this with meningitis on top of it all. So now I have this neurological damage from meningitis. I'm still pouring alcohol on it. And that's when God stepped in. And for whatever reason, I walked in after 7 years. I walked into AA, but this time there was somebody sitting there, and I'd never met the man, but I just knew to trust him, and I didn't trust anybody my entire life. I trusted no one, but I knew to trust him. I listened to him. I did the 12 steps, and guess what? Everything happened. I'm not talking about sobriety. I'm talking about a conscious contact with God happened. I had no Christian upbringing, nothing, no experience with the Christian community whatsoever. Yet I'm in AA. I follow the steps they tell me to. And if you listen and if you really look at what the steps do, it's not about stopping drinking. It's about having a conscious contact with God. And then you have a side effect of sobriety. That's what it's about. So I experienced this. It changed my life. Now, when it changed my life, I went and my career was very good again. And I look back at my career, and God was calling me away from my career. I didn't know what for. I just knew it had to do with mental health and substance abuse disorders. And I was supposed to use my expertise in neuromodulation and neuroplasticity. That's my professional background. I was supposed to use that to somehow come up with something new, and that's all I knew. So I introduced myself into the Christian community. I had to learn what it was all about. I introduced myself into the recovery community. I had to learn what that on a local level, had to learn what all that was about. And I started writing down everything. I didn't know why, but I started writing down everybody I met, what we spoke about. And then I would go back, look at it, make notes, not knowing why I was doing this. It was a 5-inch binder full of handwritten notes. When I was complete with that, I realized what I had done. I have a background in clinical research. I'd written an observation study, and I had done it on the community of Canton, Georgia. I looked at their entire community and how they handled people with mental health and substance abuse disorders. That's when I noticed that everyone had the right intentions. Everyone wanted people to get better, but they couldn't agree on how to do it. You go to your doctor, you might get a medication, but they're not going to do anything for you spiritually. You go to your church, they might, or recovery, they might do something for you spiritually, but they can do nothing for you medically. So they're at odds in how they do things. They disagree on how things are done. So I started looking at building ecosystems and found a way for these three communities to come together. And that's what I'm trying to promote now. And I'm doing that through something called the Antheos Project. It's really important that it be known that while I was going through this process, psilocybin and psychedelics were not a part of the process. My first conscious contact with God was because of the 12 steps. And that's really important later for what we're going to talk about. Where psilocybin came in was I was about 3.5 to 4 years into this at the time. And I'd gotten to the point where just stagnation set in. And when I become stagnant, I become depressed. That's what I was diagnosed with, was major depression. And so everything was spiraling down. I funded this thing myself. So, the pressure was really on, and I went to a friend and I told him, this is what's happening and I don't know what to do. And he said, have you looked into the work that Johns Hopkins is doing on psilocybin research? So I told him no, and I looked into it, and one study stuck out to me in particular, and it was a study that they did on clergy, and it wasn't just Christians; it was Muslims, I believe. A rabbi was involved. So they did this study on clergy, and the results were phenomenal. The spiritual connection they had, they rated it. I think it was like 80%. Close to 80% rated it as the top spiritual connection experience that they had ever had in their entire life. So I dug into the research. Again, knowing a lot about neuroplasticity, I dug into the research and I became convinced. And then I looked at what they were doing with the veterans also around psychedelics. And I became convinced, well, wait a minute, not only may this be a good thing for PTSD, which I do have, and depression, but this may be a way to connect with God more so than I ever have. So I did. I had a psilocybin experience, and I did it by the book. I followed Emery's protocol. They involved. There's a very big spiritual aspect to what they do.
Can you dive into that protocol a little bit?
Sure. Emory is the Emory Center for Psychedelics and Spiritual Studies, I believe, something like that, or the Center for it here in Atlanta. But what they've done, they've combined spiritual guidance. There's clergy involved. There's psychiatry that's involved. And they spiritually prepare people before the journey. And it incorporates whatever their faith base is. It incorporates spiritual leadership from that religion, faith, whatever.
It's really interesting stuff. What you have that I like what you have is your scientific backing is it's pretty in line. It's pretty good, I mean, that's what a lot of people are looking for. So that's what the Western world really trust. They don't trust the underground guy that's sitting there saying, look what psilocybin has done for me. They're really looking at the guy with the white coat or the girl with the white coat, however we want to say that. So these scientific things, these scientific studies are really important to the Western world. I believe differently on some things, and we'll get into that later. But for you, what I've really connected about you is how you're going all about this in the spirituality way. Because what I truly believe with these psychedelics is what I have found and what I've known, and I don't want to get into much what I know, but is you do find a God source, and you do find some kind of source, a connection to some truth that is within you. Because I didn't grow up Christian myself either. I kind of shunned away from it because it weirded me out in kind of a way when I was younger. And it still kind of weirds me out today because where's the connection? The connection's not putting some money in a plate and being friends for your people for an hour. The connection should be within you. So I believe all psychedelics have that ability to do that. And let's go on from there because I believe that's so important, that connection to that spirituality connection, that whatever that is, even in the Bible, it tells us that where we are source. So we have to find source somehow. And let source be within us because it has to be within us to find it. I mean, what's our belief there?
Right. Well, if you again, you not being raised in the Christian community or in the Christian church, I can just tell you what is that inner being you're talking about. For me, 100% is the Holy Spirit. And again, I experienced that as a result of working the 12 steps. Now, when it absolutely came alive, as in I knew that the Holy Spirit was within me, but when it actually came alive is when I had the psilocybin experience and the integration that happened a few weeks after that. The connections, everything that had happened in my life up to that point to prepare me for what we were trying to do became crystal clear. All of that research that I did, that I became stagnant and I just couldn't make sense of it. I had a lot of information, but it wouldn't come together. I blamed it on the damage from the meningitis. Maybe that's what it was. Within 3 weeks of that psilocybin experience, every one of those connections came together. Now, when I tell you this wasn't just a plan, okay, this wasn't just a plan that came together, all this knowledge I had come together. It was so much more than that. And it shows itself to me every single day. When I aligned myself, that's what I consider it. When I align myself through a psilocybin experience or other methods, but when I align myself with that Holy Spirit, things happen in my life that I cannot take credit for. When I tell you the people that I've been in contact with, and I'll mention a few of the names and they'll be okay with it, but I've come in contact with within the psychedelic community, it's amazing because I've come in contact with very, very few. Um, I'll give you an example, and it has to be something beyond me. An example is the first person that I ever met within the psychedelic community was a guy named Reverend Hunt Priest. He is Reverend Priest was a participant in that Johns Hopkins study on clergy I was telling you about, and I believe it was about 6 months ago. In the New Yorker, they wrote an entire story about this guy, and that happened to be the first person that I met. And he formed what is called Ligare, and it's basically the Christian psychedelic church. I mean, he has brought together theologians from across the globe. He's an amazing man.
Yeah, this Christian and the church, and I'd like to experience and talk about that a little more because that's pretty powerful if we can get those people to convert, you know? Not convert, but to understand, I guess you say.
You mentioned something earlier. Christians and psychedelics, they do not go hand in hand, and we know this. However, Christians do believe in Western medicine. They do believe in the science of medicine. With the studies that have come out, we have the proof that these experiences happen. We have the proof that psilocybin helps, if not cures in some cases, PTSD, depression, anxiety, chronic pain, which I am big. My entire career was based on chronic pain before all this happened.
I mean, it is when you're talking to this group class in this group of people, like Christians. I don't like labeling people, but that's what it is. It's Christians. Christians come and they're part of a society that really believes go to church every Sunday. Let's do this. Let's do that. If we can but when they leave the church atmosphere, they go back to their normal everyday life. So if you could really throw some studies in there, or what really interests me is these monks and these priests that did this John Hopkins study. I got to ask Michelle about that because her brother is a doctor at John Hopkins. It's pretty amazing that they did this study, and that is the closest thing they've come to a spiritual experience in their whole time. Doesn't that tell you something? Doesn't it tell you something that the whole AA platform was created through a psychedelic experience?
Yeah, it definitely had a part in it for sure. Yeah, the 12 steps, it's beautiful. It's Jungian psychology. If you look at it, there's actually letters written between Carl Jung and Bill Wilson, the creator of AA. So it's Jungian psychology meets psychedelics meets Christian principles. That's what AA is.
You're very true because the 12 steps are very they're how we should live our lives,
Mm,
basically. I mean, they're how you really. The one thing I don't like about AA is the labels. Like, you can never heal. You're always going to be an alcoholic. You're this. You know, labels are not good, and you continue to label yourself or call yourself out like that, I don't think is good either. For 20 years to keep calling yourself an alcoholic, to me, I don't resonate with it. I resonate with a lot of the structure, a lot of the philosophy. I definitely resonate with the steps, and it's helpful. Look at how many people it's helped. Think if we could indoctrinate, think if we could get into that culture, those people, and say, okay, you've gone this far, let's shake the snow globe up a little bit more, and let's see how further you can get. So,
man, you just hit the nail on the head. Yeah, I wrote a paper about this, but the thing is, if you go to churches, at least here in Georgia, AA meetings are held in a lot of the basements. Now, what's amazing is the people with problems go downstairs to these 12-step meetings, and the people without problems, they stay upstairs. And here's the amazing thing. When you're downstairs, the testimonies that you're going to hear downstairs about people finding their way to God, anything that you're going to hear upstairs. And they are often, it's not one or two you're going to hear a week. It is every single day in every one of those meetings, you're going to hear that somebody was delivered in some way from a sin, or they're delivered to God or whatever else. So imagine this, because the church does a great job of saying, hey, this is what God expects of us. They do a terrible job of saying, this is how we get there. There's no process in place. What if we brought the 12 steps upstairs and said, hey guys, no matter what your issue is, no matter what your sin is, no matter what it is that you're trying to change about yourself, you're welcome here. We're going to match you with somebody that's actually walked that path before you, because we believe in radical transparency. And we're going to give you a process to get you there so that you can actually have, and it does happen. You follow those steps. I'm telling you, you have a conscious contact with God. You have that new reality will hit you. That would change the church. I mean, if the church wanted to grow, if they really wanted Christianity to bloom, that's exactly what they would do. They have to have a process, and there is no process. That's why people are lost right now. They're bouncing from their doctor to a recovery room to their church. They're bouncing in between. Who's going to help me, and who's right and who's wrong? The answer is everybody's right to some degree. It's about working together, and especially with psychedelics, and getting the research and talking to them in their language so that we can get them educated, because there are people in their churches that are suffering right now, and they don't have to. It's not just about, hey, let's have everybody do psychedelics. Not at all. It's about getting people as far as we can with the 12 steps. Some medical intervention might be needed in some cases. But then for those people that have medically resistant, and we know that they're out there, medically resistant mental health disorders like depression and PTSD, those are the people that need to have access to psilocybin.
absolutely. But what happens if you do bring the 12 steps downstairs, upstairs? There's a lot of egos, and there's a lot of people that, you know, it'd be a hard process, because I feel that you have to truly go inward to get outward. You have to, like, and a lot of people are like, they really have a hard time doing that. They have a hard time accepting mistakes are blessings instead of they're not, because, oh, I didn't do that wrong. Well, I did do that wrong, and let me change how I do that next time. That's not how we think. That's not how the rest of the world thinks. That's how I think now, because that's not how I used to think. So I think that's where we're going to come into a lot of friction. Some people just say, let's go have communion. All my stuff is forgiven. Let's start Monday again on a fresh slate. What fresh slate, buddy? Where's your slate? What have you even done? You drank some wine? It's just really, it's pretty crazy. And they followed this protocol for how many years now, which is something that has to change, because a lot of people are pulling away from church. So those places aren't as filled as they used to be.
Yeah, the
So
2022 Gallup poll, for the first time in U.S. history, has less than 50% of U.S. population goes to church now, less than 50%. So the church membership is declining, and the church membership's declining because the mental health substance abuse problem is getting worse, and the church offers no solution whatsoever.
Can we talk about your ministry for a while? What you're trying to create here?
Well, we can start with the medical part of it. Yeah, so that's really the professional side of what I'm doing right now. So, my background is in neuromodulation. So, neuromodulation is basically the application of a stimulus within the body to elicit a therapeutic response. An example would be some people know about spinal cord stimulators. That's what my expertise was in. It's basically like a pacemaker for the spine. Leads are put up in the epidural space on the spine, and electricity sent to it, and people have pain relief from it. Well, and there's many more applications in the body for neuromodulations, but that was one. So I had a background in education and sales and a lot of clinical research. I was a neuromodulation sales rep, a spinal cord stimulator sales rep at the time. And part of my job was to go in and educate patients. I went in the doctor in the operating room and all that stuff to help them with the implant. As part of my job, I got really close to the patients, and I went in and the physician wanted me to speak to a patient who had really been through the ringer. She was in a wheelchair, early 30s, and just not doing well. And so I spoke to her. She already had a bunch of surgeries. She did not want another one, but she decided after we spoke, okay, I'm going to give this another shot. Her chances were 50-50. And sure enough, she came out of it an absolute miracle. I mean, she's out of her wheelchair. This woman got her life back. She's going back to work. She went skydiving against we said, no, don't do that. Your wires might move, but she didn't care. She went, just got her life back. Well, she became, just such an advocate for us that I said, will you become our patient ambassador? Meaning, when patients are interested in this, will you speak to them about your experience? And she agreed. And I started setting these, education events up for her, and she was phenomenal. And, patients really listened to her, shared her experience, went through, helped us have better outcomes. So everything was great. And then, a family tragedy happened. Something bad happened to her in her family, and, she couldn't take it. And then next thing you know, she's not answering calls. She's not making her doctor's appointments. Worst of all, her spinal cord stimulator that gave her life back, it went away. There's a reason that it went away. But it went away, it stopped working. And there was nothing wrong with that spinal cord stimulator. It was exactly where it was supposed to be. Nothing had changed. But this tragedy, it triggered something in her to where she started ignoring the pain relief that she started had. She became depressed. She detached herself from everybody, and she committed suicide. When she committed suicide, I was at another research site, and I knew that my life was changing. I'd gone through this experience, this conscious contact with God thing, and her suicide sparked me to leave what I was doing. It was great. It was a fantastic position that I was in. But it sparked me to leave and start looking at building something. And that's all I could tell you is building something for substance abuse and mental health. And then eventually it turned into chronic pain. The medical part of it right now is in the interventional pain management community, 40 to 60% of every patient that's in interventional pain management practice has depression. The majority of those people with depression do not respond to medications, and they are not getting the psychiatric care that they need. They're in the pain clinics, but their mental health is not being monitored as it should be monitored. When this happens, when we try to treat pain and we just push depression to the side, or we ignore it, or we don't address it, aggressively address it, things like what happened to my friend happen to other patients.
Well, doesn't pain actually cause depression? Isn't that part of the process? So let's alleviate the pain, and then we can help the opposite. So It all goes hand in hand, right?
Well, is it chicken and egg, or is it the
Mhm.
same one and the same? My argument is it's one and the same. One and the same. If you look at there's something called transcranial magnetic stimulation. If you and it treats in the same area of the brain, it treats pain and it treats depression among a couple other things in the exact area of the brain where this is stimulated. There's a reason for that because the two are connected. You treat one, the other gets better automatically. They are literally connected in the brain. So ignoring that within the pain management community, we can no longer ignore it. We have the technology now to address it through, like I just said, transcranial magnetic stimulation is a fantastic way. Down the road, when we start seeing approval of some psychedelics, specifically, I'm interested in psilocybin. I absolutely believe that psilocybin will play a role in the chronic pain community. Absolutely.
What is your hope for your BGD ministry? What are you looking for to really establish for the future?
On the medical side of things, I want to see every interventional pain practice in the country have collaborative care, meaning that they include psychiatry. Now, whether that includes the transcranial magnetic stimulation I just mentioned or not, that's going to be so a lot of that's even an economic thing and a regional thing. It all depends. When that could be offered, I think it'd be fantastic. I think it'd be a great addition to every single one of those clinics.
So offering therapy with pain management.
Yeah, so offering it's called TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation. So what I'm saying is I believe a couple things. Chronic pain patients need access to collaborative care that includes a psychiatrist. Their mental health needs to be monitored. For those patients that are medically or I'm sorry, resistant, they have treatment resistant depression, PTSD, anxiety, chronic pain, they need to have alternatives. What I'm saying is one of those alternatives right now that is FDA approved, that's paid for and all that other stuff is transcranial magnetic stimulation, and it has a wonderful effect.
Wade, can we talk about what that is to people? I don't think we even really, you said it a little bit in the beginning, but can we talk about what it is and what it does?
Sure. TMS, I believe the first device it was a UK company in 1986. But basically, imagine a wand. Okay, imagine a wand that has magnetic pulses, like an MRI. You go in an MRI and you hear the loud pop, 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 that noise. This is not near as powerful as that. However, it is powerful enough to where if you put that wand specifically over the dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex right here, if you put that wand here and you do these repetitive magnetic pulses, basically it turns into energy. That energy then fires, goes into that brain region, and it changes the neural pathways. It changes the neural pathways. It causes neuroplasticity, which I don't know if you're very familiar with that, but over these series of treatments, the brain literally starts to rewire itself and have different patterns. So you don't have the rumination and, a cycle of depression. It actually breaks it. And they're having long-term effects. Long-term, you take a antidepressant, you may be better for a day or two. You come off of them, your problem comes back. With the TMS, it's a different story. You go through the
Because you're
course of,
actually rewiring new neural pathways. Because when we were a child and we were growing up, we were told our brain does not regenerate, but we all definitely know it does. It grows new neural pathways. We have our neuroplasticity. And, when I think we talked about this once, that I had a few concussions when I was younger, and they said that would never grow back.
right.
That'll never come back. Well, it does. I mean, it actually does, especially with psychedelics. And I, what you're talking about here, which is pretty amazing. And so this is actually something that is utilized and paid for through insurances right now, correct?
It is. It is. And again, let me take a step back because I truly, I didn't know. I didn't, I don't want to come on here and sound like I'm here to plug, like TMS because I'm just full disclosure. I am a consultant and TMS is part of that consultant deal. So I don't want it to look like I've come on here and like plugging something for my business. That's not what I'm doing. I mean, the chances of getting business from this podcast on that side of things next to zero, but I just want full disclosure that I do have a TMS connection
Yeah, I totally get it because we're just here to inform people. So informing people that they don't know what it is. And can we go back to the ministry a little bit? Because I think this is really a good subject here. And let's talk about not the medical part of it, but talk about the future for people, what you see as the future of your ministry looking like once we get all around the medical hoopla.
The ultimate goal is something that
Hmm.
I call the Center for Spiritual Wellness and Neuroplastic Change. And what that is it's a protocol basically that starts with the 12 steps, and it starts with behavioral health assessments, and it pinpoints exactly where people are, no matter whether no matter if it's a substance abuse problem, a chronic pain, no matter what the problem is, if they just want to get closer to God, no matter what your issue is, you have an issue, you have substance abuse issue, or you've been going to church your whole life and you just can't understand how people talk about they've experienced God, yet you never have. Well, in that case, there's a process at a Center for Spiritual Wellness and Neuroplastic Change. You can go in, do the 12 steps, which those 12 steps, I mean, it carves down until you get to exactly who you are as a person. It gets you prepared spiritually. Most of the time, that does it for most people. They get that connection. The majority of people, if they do it and they do it thoroughly, they will get that connection. What else that center will do, though, is for those people that have resistant conditions like, depression, that has not responded to anything else. Well, there are options for those people. One is the TMS that we talked about. And yes, the other one is going to be, because it's coming, it's going to be psychedelics. Now, this center, and like again, just because you come to the center doesn't mean you come here and you have all three things. It's a progression. And even if, sometimes it's going to be an either or thing if you do progress to something
So what
beyond.
would that look like, Dwayne? What would that look like, somebody joining that ministry? How would I mean, would you have to go through a process? Would it be like a 12 step, or where would the breakdown be of like, we need to do this or we need to go this?
We're trying to figure that out now. So remember the ecosystem I'm talking about? We're trying to look at what model is going to work, because there's a lot of things going on with legislation right now, as you know. And we need to look at what models are even going to be available. The medicalization of everything is happening right now. Whether it was cannabis, medicalization of psychedelics, I mean, ibogaine, it's all that. And I'm not saying anything bad about it, but it is happening.
That's an interesting one you just measured, like out of the clear blue. That one, I mean, it was ketamine, and everybody talking about psilocybin, and then here, out of the woodwork from Africa, ibogaine. I mean, I'm here seeing ibogaine more so than I see ketamine now, than I see anything. So somebody somewhere is right on that edge of clinically getting that approved very soon.
Yeah, yeah, Brian. I mean, Brian Hubbard is, and again through Hunt Priest, and I mentioned earlier, he knows him well. That Brian Hubbard and Governor Rick Perry, they're on top of this, and they have the money. I forget how much it was, but it was something like 500 million, some ridiculous amount of money. But I mean, I'm all for it. I mean, I'm all for it. I've read the studies, and oh my God, I mean, it truly does what it says it's going to do. But you have to be medically monitored. You cannot do that outside of medical. There's some cardiac effects and that kind of thing.
Of course, that is one of the psychedelics that really, when it comes to the heart, you got to be really careful of. But that is the one. I mean, that's the one that's, PTSD, addictions, really, I mean, results are coming in for some of these that on your first flood, you could get 86% opioid addiction. On your second, it's almost 90 something. Nothing's like that. Not even, hey, not even programs. There's nothing that performs like that. And, we've lost it, and now it's coming back. And we just have to help people really understand, that these aren't drugs. They really aren't. They've been around for what we're using in the medical field are drugs because they're only like what, 95, 100 years old. What we're talking about is tens of thousands, been used forever.
Absolutely. The model that I was talking about is, of course, we're going to have the medicalization of it. But the other model is, I'm a veteran. I consider myself an American patriot. It's just, it comes down to religious freedom. these modalities, especially I'm sticking to psilocybin especially. Psilocybin needs to be made available outside of the medical community, and it does belong in faith-based institutions. It is absolutely our religious freedom. I can tell you from experience, just like so many more people can tell you, like the study at Johns Hopkins can tell you, that this is a spiritual tool. It is not a drug. This is an absolute spiritual tool. So yeah, it should be available in the spiritual community under the right circumstances with medical supervision, the proper safety measures, but it needs to be available in both places. One reason for this is I have looked at the financial model of what it would cost someone to have a psilocybin experience per most protocols that I've looked at, medical protocols. If I'm right, that's going to be somewhere between $15,000 and $25,000. I don't know what insurance is going to do. I don't know if they're going to pay for it, but let's say that it does pay for it. Well, where does that leave the uninsured, which people with substance abuse, mental health problems, it's the homeless community, people that don't have that. The only people that are going to be able to access it through the medical community are people that can afford the insurance to get them there. So where are we going to do about these other people? That's where I believe that the faith community comes in. And with people like Hunt Priest leading the charge with Ligare, it's not a ridiculous thought anymore. We're talking. I even have this is funny, but I have a local Baptist preacher I've been talking to in Canton, Georgia the past couple of days. I mean, people are starting to listen a little bit.
I think they're starting to listen a lot, really. I think they know something has to change. They see society right now. We're not in a really good spot for anything, It just, it's just, we're at a time right now where people like you are important. People like Decrim Nature are important. People like maps are important. Because all this does is it brings attention to this space. And if we can get attention to the space, people can make their own decisions. And when people start making their own decisions, then they start getting out of the system. And it's going to be a slow process. It's been a slow process since the 70s, but we got to keep this movement going because we know this works. I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's what you do electronically or what somebody does with medicines, or if you get it through meditation. There's a way to connect to source, and that's all I can say. And once you connect to source, you connect to self, and then everything changes.
Absolutely. Yeah, I literally found through going through this process again before psilocybin became introduced, but I literally found my God-given purpose through that systematic process of the 12 steps. But what the psilocybin did is it took down everything that I thought was a barrier, that it was in my mind as far as possibilities. We all put up these things. Well, I could go this direction or that direction, but now maybe I can't because this is in the way. What psilocybin did was it just knocked down every one of those barriers that were there, that were an illusion. The barriers weren't there at all. They were within me. They were within me. So once I learned this and I identified it, I was able to work on what is it within me that's causing that barrier to be up, and the barriers fell away. And when they fell away, I grew. And it's because of that experience.
The neural pathways just started firing up again. Your snow globe went crazy, and it all just settles in. And there's no right or wrong way to do psychedelics. There's no right or wrong way to do psilocybin. There's no right or wrong way to heal. But we can tell you this. A medicine like psilocybin has been around. It's the oldest fungi there is. It connects everything underneath. It's grown, it's collected millions and millions and millions of years of DNA. So it's definitely there for something. And it's the only fungi that is on every single continent in the world, in every single state. There's not a place that it doesn't grow. So they've given us this for a reason. It's here for a reason. And I truly believe that we have the religious right to consume any plant we want because God gave us these plants. We shouldn't be controlled any way, shape, or form. What's controlling is them taking it, putting it in a capsule and redefining it, what the molecular structure really is. And that's what I say. I love maps. I love what you do. I love what we do. I love what everybody does to bring awareness to this space, because then people can make their choices. Because psilocybin, there's never been one clinical death. Am I speaking right, Wade? Never been one clinical death from psilocybin or cannabis or those two. They're demonized. You know how many people will die from alcohol today? 5,000. 5,000.
Yeah, I've experienced, of course, like many other people. I've experienced cannabis, psilocybin. If anyone hears this podcast, any of it resonates with you, reach out to me, because right now, I mentioned earlier, I've met very few people in the psychedelic community, but I've met some really interesting people. I'm looking to grow my network now. Yeah, it's crazy. I think I know 6 or 7 people really in the whole community. But I think I told you I just met Zach Leary like 2 weeks ago, Timothy Leary's son, and of course Hunt Priest. I won't say who, but when all this first started, the craziest thing was a very high level government official. I mean, high level, came to my house, sat on my couch for a couple hours to talk theory. It was the craziest thing. So that's why I'm talking about alignment. Like, there's no way I could align that stuff. Yeah, so I'm looking to connect with people in the Christian community that care about recovery, people in the medical community that are interested, in especially the emergent psychedelics, and I'm looking to connect all 3 of these. I'm at the intersection between these 3 communities, and it's kind of a lonely place. And I add psychedelics into what I'm doing, it gets really lonely. So yeah, so I'm looking. Ideally, I would love to find, and it doesn't have to be Christian. Any faith, anyone interested in protecting religious rights, I want to talk to you. I'm very interested in legislation. I believe I have quite a bit to offer. You can email me at it's Pope David Wade, POPEDAVIDWADE at gmail.com. And yeah, that's it.